And this one, we're going to have a case study in focus, which runs in the competition section here at the CPH Docs Film Festival, after winning the Special Jury Award for Cinema Vérité filmmaking at Sundance this year also. Is the post-truth era a struggle for documentary? Or does a contemporary cinema vérité hold more power than ever before? So we have with us, live from New York, the founder and director of the documentary program of the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, Yoruba Richen. She is also an award-winning documentary filmmaker, and her work has been featured on PBS, New York Times, Frontline, The Atlantic, and Field of Vision. Her latest film, How It Feels to Be Free, nice name, executively produced by Alicia Keys, premiered on the PBS American Masters in January this year. She will be more than a moderator also here and lead the discussion with the none less awarded Camilla Nielsson, director of President, but also of Democrats in 2014, to explore unique challenges and opportunities also of the anthropological lens. Yoruba, I let you take over. Post-truth, post-vérité, an anthropological perspective on president. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And nice to see you, Camilla.
Nice to see you too, Yoruba. Finally.
Finally, exactly. So I'm just going to read a little bit about who Camilla Nielsson is and her work. And then we will go to the trailer from her film, very important film, which I think really gets at the heart of the discussion today. Camilla Nielsson is an award-winning independent filmmaker based in Copenhagen, Denmark. She holds a master's degree in visual anthropology from New York University, NYU. Her work expands across diverse topics, from the trilogy on children's rights with Good Morning Afghanistan, which she made in 2003, Durga, 2004, and The Children of Darfur, which she made in 2006, to bureaucracy and traffic planning in the urban comedy of Mumbai Disconnected. Her first feature documentary, Democrats, about the drafting of the new constitution in Zimbabwe, has received more than 25 international awards and nominations, including Best Documentary at the Tribeca Film Festival. And her new feature documentary, President, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2021, just a couple months ago, where it won the World Cinema Documentary Special Jury Award for Verite filmmaking. Let's go to a trailer from that film.
This is an era of upsets, right? Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton, Brexit in the UK. You defeating Emerson and Mnangagwa, that would be an electoral upset on that kind of scale. Can you really see yourself pulling that off?
Of course, I'm ready for it. I mean, I'm more than ready. I feel the energy.
But I will change our pain. And is it? The pain. The pain.
I'm not here for kisses and hugs. I'm here for a fight. We are ready for any consequence until we have a free and fair election in Zimbabwe. Change is coming, and change is coming. It cannot be denied.
Those who believe in change, Things are happening in Zimbabwe.
Today is a day of mourning. Mourning over democracy. It is a black day. These guys are making Mugabe look like a saint.
These are all shots. Blanks.
Oma, we're at war. We're dealing with criminals.
Hey, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. So this is a democracy.
This is a coup.
It's a coup. Yeah, it's a coup.
This is a coup.
The results that have been announced and not been verified by us.
An assassination attempt was made only last week. Chamisa has survived so many assassination attempts.
Mr. Chamisa, you are the hope for Zimbabwe. Please do not take that hope away from us.
Hi. What a powerful trailer, what a powerful film. I had seen your film, Democrats, the first film about Zimbabwe, and it's amazing to see, it was amazing to watch this film and see, your continued documentation of the fight for democracy in Zimbabwe. I'm especially interested because my first film was made in South Africa. So I've been following the issues around in Zimbabwe for a long time now, obviously, as have you. So there's so much to dig into here. My first question actually is part of documenting democracy or anything, right, is getting access to the process, access to the people. Can you tell us how you were able to do that in both of these films, really?
Yeah, well, to just start with and I should start by saying thank you for having us today. It's a really nice as a filmmaker to be able to talk about documentary and talk about your work, not just in terms of its topics, democracy in Zimbabwe, but also to talk about, film and how they work and why we made them and how they are made. So thank you to the festival and to you, Yoruba, for taking up this subject. Yes, there are very different scenarios in terms of how I got access to these two films, Democrats and President. To start with the first one, Democrats is filmed in Zimbabwe from 2010 to 2013, when the country was in the process of writing its first democratic constitution. That process took place while President/dictator Robert Mugabe was still in power. And the sole aim of making that constitution from the parliamentarians, from the progressive democratic forces in Zimbabwe, was actually to limit Zimbabwe's executive power. And so there's a bit of a idiosyncrasy here that you write a democratic constitution while the dictator is still in charge. So access to that film was very, very difficult. It took about a year and a half for us to approach the Ministry of Information, to approach the people who were part of the constitution-making process. Zimbabwe is a very closed society in terms of media. At that point, Mugabe had not allowed foreign media in the country for almost a decade. BBC was banned. Foreign journalists had a history of getting arrested and shipped out of the country. So it was a long, tedious, interesting, but difficult process, of course, to allow me and my camera person to film. Our argument was that very few countries, like I'm from Denmark, we wrote our constitution hundreds of years ago. There's not much record about how this constitution was made. I'd say the same for the American Constitution. There's many anecdotes and lots of legendary tales, but what data do we have about how it was really produced? So I felt it was interesting to document such an important project. That I was able to explain easily, and because everybody was excited, except for Mugabe, but most people in the country was excited about this process about to happen. The difficult part was that there was no real history of observational or cinema verite filmmaking in Zimbabwe. at that point. And so the idea of making a film with this kind of omnipresence that you have when you make documentaries the way I do was not experienced before. A lot of documentary filmmakers in Zimbabwe have been used to going to a press conference, getting a statement from the regime, and then with archive and other stuff available, put their stories together. And that's, of course, because it's a dictatorship and information is sensitive and tightly controlled. But I think we made our case by first approaching the opposition, who, of course, had a clear interest in having a film made about their progressive project. And once they were on board, it was difficult for the regime to say that they also didn't want to be part of it. And then I think slowly, over month and month of just hanging out without filming and getting access. And I should say, I'm not the only person working on this. There were many people instrumental in clearing access for the first film. And that finally happened, and we filmed for 3 years during the constitution making process, and made a film where sort of it was learning by doing. We had to sort of explain every day why we were doing things the way we were. And I think slowly we created an understanding amongst our participants that this is a different way of making film that we are used to, but we are open to it. And I think this work then again helped us in the making of the sequel, President, which is the one we are premiering at CPH Docs, because we had sort of already spent so much time in the country and had gained the trust from our participants. So the second film actually took only about 5 minutes for the protagonist and some of the participants to agree to be part of the movie. So it's two very different scenarios in terms of access. But I think the labor and the understandings and the time we spent and the trust we gained in the first film was what helped us in the second film.
Absolutely. It's when I read about what this topic was and what we were discussing, it was so interesting to me because you'd been documenting this process, what's going on in Zimbabwe before really kind of the rise of social media, of these post-truth narratives, which we now see all over the world. So a couple questions, and then we should probably get to a clip too, because we have a few clips to show. But my first question is so we saw in the film the role, you use news reports to help show what, the process and where we were, and to, as opposed to, obviously not a narrator, but to give us the lead up and the aftermath. Is social media a factor in Zimbabwe? Was it a factor in the election and how people were understanding the process?
When you say a factor, I can say yes, it's definitely a factor. Social media has exploded in Zimbabwe because a lot of the non-social media, traditional media, television, radio, newspapers, etc., are controlled by the ruling government. And it's been very difficult for people with a different opinion to get a platform to express themselves. So once everybody has got access to the internet, have a smartphone, and logged onto Facebook or WhatsApp, I'd say that there was a kind of explosion of social media in Zimbabwe, which is still there. It's kind of the only tool there is if you disagree with the government. But when you say factor, yes, it's a factor. There are loads of debates and people are engaging on social media. But the problem is in terms of, can it create change, or how can it be a tool for the population to address some of the concerns they have, since national media is not available to them? I'd actually say no, because the fact that it's a military dictatorship, and I dare put that thing out that it's still a military dictatorship even after Mugabe has gone, means that the military is involved in everything. Also what's printed in the newspaper. And of course you can share your opinion on WhatsApp or in social groups on Facebook, but it's not going to change much. Zimbabwe is ruled by the gun. And there's also, I say, in the last 6 months, since the government has been a bit under pressure, there's been a heavy crackdown on activists, opposition members, others who are expressing opinions that are different from the regime on social media. A political activist and friend of mine, filmmaker as well, was arrested recently for just making a tweet about the fact that there's corruption in the country, which we all know. And they came and took his camera and sort of completely disarmed him as an activist and a filmmaker for a tweet. So how effective it is in terms of change, I'm not so sure, but it's there, and I think it has I think it's a good place for people to vent, to talk and discuss ideas. But in terms of creating lasting change or building a sustainable democracy in Zimbabwe, I'm afraid that the power of the gun and the force of the military is still what's keeping things at where it is.
Should we go to one of the clips?
Yes. I can maybe set it up a bit, because I'm assuming that people who are watching today have not necessarily seen our film besides the trailer. So maybe I should just set it up, because I think it's interesting in terms of discussing truth, and maybe I just also preface it to we're talking about cinema verité, and I'm glad you called our talk, you prefaced it with a contemporary cinema verité, because as you see in my trailer and you'll see in this clip, we use music. The film is edited in a 3-act structure, and we're using a lot of tools from the genres that are usually characterizing fiction work. And I'm not sure if Jean Rouge or Albert Maysles would approve that this is pure cinema verité, but this is the scene that I chose, because I think it's a moment where cinema verité has its force, and the force for me is that you are there in the now and you document what happens now. And we are at the first election here in this clip after Mugabe was ousted in the military dictatorship in 2017. It's election night, and the results are about to declare who is become the president of Zimbabwe. They have read out 9 out of 10 provinces, so we are just waiting for the last province to declare the winner. And suddenly the head of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission decides to take a break. She gets a little note and she calls the event off and says she'll come back in an hour. And we are with our protagonist here, members of the opposition movement, who are not happy about the status or the results that have been read out. So maybe if you can play clip 1, please.
Do we address the presser now, or we wait for?
No, you need to discredit them before they announce, if we could.
So let us go.
Is it time or?
Attention to members of the press. We would like to give a short statement, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. Difficult times in our country, but we will get there. I'll introduce our chairperson, Senator Komeshi, to come and give you a brief statement.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Good evening, gentlemen and ladies.
So far.
We reject the results because the results that have been announced have not been verified by us. I did not sign those results, so the results are fake. The results have just been printed and they've not been verified by the polling agent.
Thank you very much. The point is made. Thank you. We will announce them. This is a coup. It's a coup.
Yeah, it's a coup.
This is a coup. They've just carried out a coup.
In watching that scene, when I watched the film, I was struck that they went on and said, declared it was a coup. The election has been rigged so early. And it brings up a question, right? And I'm here in the U.S., so we have had our own struggles and insurrections just recently, and our own challenges to our democracy. We have our past president who has declared, that the election was stolen, and we have, even though President Biden won, there's still a large majority, not majority, but a large swath of the population that believes that the election was illegitimate based on nothing. It's a fact based on nothing. So it's very interesting hearing the MDC declare that it was, that this was a stolen election. It wasn't fair. And they have, some evidence that they try to bring into court. But what are your thoughts about that? It's this idea that, that elections can be declared, you can say an election is unfair and, illegitimate, and people can believe it based on facts or not. What does that mean for the filmmaker in trying to show, you as a filmmaker in trying to show, real problems with the elections and the process?
Yeah, well, the fact that Trump, well, maybe I should just go back a little bit. When in November, December, and January last year, when we were just finishing the edit of President, a film about a stolen election in Zimbabwe, where our hero or our protagonist actually had a just cause. I believe the election was stolen for him. There is proof that the election was stolen. And my main concern at that point was, like, how do we get the rest of the world how do they get the international community who had been there as international observers, had overseen the process, agreed it probably wasn't entirely free affair, but sort of left again, and in my opinion, left the job undone. In the final stages of editing the film or completing the film, you start to think about distribution strategies, and I was certain that nobody in the world except for Zimbabweans and perhaps myself would care about the fact that there was this great injustice that happened at the election in 2018. And then end of November, December, January, when Trump started the election was stolen for me show, I got even more nervous because one thing was that you started to debate the independence of electoral commissions, ballot papers, postal votes. Everything that we were dealing with in a very local Zimbabwean context was suddenly reflected on CNN every evening. But my concern was that our protagonist, who I portray as a hero or a good guy in the movie with a just cause, he was suddenly being mirrored who was perceived in most circles, in my world at least, as a villain. My protagonist, Nielsson was suddenly directly mirroring himself in Donald Trump. And I felt that the fact that you could just sort of in a post-truth world, like Trump did come out and say this election was stolen without any proof, really damaged our story in a serious way. Because we didn't believe Trump, and would that mean that now people would also not believe Nielsson Chamisa, who had a real cause? That's in terms of the film, which is sort of a microcosm of the whole thing. The real concern is, of course, how can you, as a young Democrat in Zimbabwe, with a real experience of a stolen election, even get anyone to pay attention to this with the Trump scenario? For me personally, and I hope the discussion and the thinking that we will take from these scenarios. We screened the film, like you said, at Sundance in January, where this had just happened, and Capitol Hill had just been attacked on January 6th. And the responses from American audience was that this is almost too much. It's too close to home. But I think that I hope what we can take out of this and what we can discuss, and maybe what my film can highlight, even if it takes place in a country that's very far away from most of us, is the importance of having independent institutions. Chamisa lost in Zimbabwe with a situation where the election commission was not free, the courts are not free, the military and the police are controlled by the government. What saved America, what saved the election, was of course that the American court system is independent and turned out to be independent, at least in this particular case. Even though Trump threw a lot of evidence towards them, none of the judges acknowledged that there was a threat of evidence in this. And I think it did make people think about something as unsexy or complex as what's the importance of independent constitutions. And that's what our film is about. It's about what happens when you don't have independent constitutions. And I hope that in the future life of president, that the fact that we in our part of the world have had a situation that mirrored the Zimbabwe situation maybe help us relate to the Zimbabwean story more easily.
Absolutely. Do we have time for one more clip? I would love to.
That's up to, I think if we have, maybe we could squeeze one more in. Then let's take clip number 2, please.
Live 8 p.m. Channel 4 News.
All right. Look at this. What is this? Go walk in event young with Zeta Save.
Let's go. Wow. Let's go.
We're here for a press conference with Nielsson Chamisa, and as you can see, the riot police have just turned up.
الشرطة طردت الصحفيين ومنعتهم من إقامة المؤتمر ومنعت المعارضة من إقامة المؤتمر الصحفي فيما تزال تتمركز أمام مقر المعارضة. هنا كان مقررا لتحالف المعارضة أن يعقد مؤتمرا صحفيا ولكن قاموا بمنع
Sir, this is a democracy. Where are you shutting Shoving her in remarkable events. The last 4 days. This is quite extraordinary.
Well, I mean, you just talked about the importance of independent institutions, and obviously the police, when it works for the government and does the government's bidding, is problematic. Though I will have to say, speaking from where my perspective here in the U.S. and especially as an African American person, we've seen finally the world is seeing the problems with even when we do have supposedly independent institutions. I'm speaking specifically around the police and the police brutality that we have always had here. So these problems are not just in in Africa, in Zimbabwe. These are problems that we face here as well. Obviously, with different iterations and extents. But I just want to put that out there. Has the film and will the film be seen in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, it not yet. But maybe I'd just like to go back to the clip and just say a few words about why I chose it. and then I'll get back to the other question, because in talking about truth and post-truth and cinema verite, when the current president of Zimbabwe removed President Mugabe from power in a military coup in 2017, he spent a lot of effort up till election day to convince the Western world, the international community, that he was, building a democracy, founding a new democracy in Zimbabwe. He had a PR company in London selling him as a Democrat because for the past 38 years he's been Mugabe's henchman. So it was a bit of a project, I think, PR-wise, to sort of reboot this guy from, spy chief, henchman, and one of the with the nickname Crocodile, one of the harshest people in Mugabe's government, was suddenly having to sell himself as a true Democrat. And I'm quite impressed with the effort that he made. I mean, the entire international community, the EU, kind of believed that he was the right man for the job. And he also managed to have an pre-electoral process up until election day where it was peaceful, the opposition could meet without restrictions, and sort of everybody was starting to say, well, maybe he has changed. Maybe he is a good guy. Maybe he is really someone who's been under the gun of President Mugabe for so many years, but having a burning democratic heart inside his chest, and now it's all showing. And why I'd like to show this clip is that, and he managed to do that. He really managed to convince the international community that he was a good guy up until this moment where he's stolen the election from the opposition candidate, and who is about to have a press conference at a hotel in Harare. And when and they weren't happy about that. The regime hadn't gone to a place where they were ready to have an opposition candidate say, it's not true. You did steal the election and I am the winner. And their way to deal with that was sort of old regime methods: send in riot police and stop the event. If we don't want to hear the truth, we'll just use force to stop it. And what I thought was interesting about this choice was that, how could they not have thought about that it was the press conference with 200 international journalists present? When you're trying to sell a country as a newborn democracy, it's very difficult when you throw in riot police with sticks in front of rolling cameras. So for me, this was actually the moment in the election in 2018 when the thin veneer of Mnangagwa's democracy project completely fell apart and the mask came on. And I think that we're talking about, the relevance of observational cinema, the relevance of being present in the now. And I think this is a story that in a few minutes as a microcosm, tells more about the election in 2018 than anything else. And it wasn't reported anywhere else. I mean, I was shocked that reporters didn't use this footage, that it wasn't the story. And so, I just made an example of how the constant rolling cameras, the presence of this observational camera, I think, are able to tell different stories than what we hear from mainstream media. And then to your questions about Zimbabwe, of course, because this is a film primarily made for a Zimbabwean audience. Or it's twofold. Of course, it's an activist film, and injustice was done, and my aim is to make people focus on what has happened. But it's also very much a story for Zimbabweans who are, because of the political situation, having a very difficult time to tell these stories right now themselves. Like I said before, a friend of mine was arrested for a tweet. And so the idea of compiling a 2-hour story that disagrees with the narrative of the government is not easy, or I'd almost say almost impossible. So therefore, to get the film out in Zimbabwe is for us the main agenda. Unfortunately, I have a history with this, and my first film was banned by Mugabe's censorship board. And of course we need to think about how we do this time. So it's in progress, but more details about exactly how we're going to do it, I'd prefer not to share at this stage.
Got it.
Yeah, okay, not to preempt the strategy.
Yeah, no, of course. I think I know the answer to this question, but it is from the audience. Do you see journalists and filmmakers there are they, even in between your last film and this film, or even now, are they feeling more able, more ability to report critically about the government?
Is it about local filmmakers and journalists, the question?
Yeah, local filmmakers in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the answer is that although that journalists and filmmakers and storytellers in general felt they had a very, very hard time during Mugabe's presidency, the story I hear from my colleagues there is that now is even worse. There's such a big paranoia in the regime that people are imprisoned, are beaten up in a much more violent way that they were during Mugabe's days. So the situation right now is not good, I'm afraid to say. So no, that's the short answer. It's a very difficult place to practice. Yeah. Journalism.
Yeah.
There's no freedom of speech. Zimbabweans say we may have freedom of speech, but we don't have freedom after speech, which means that you can say what you want, but they're going to come and pick me up. So it's difficult.
Right. As we wait for more questions from the audience, I have you've been talking about the local filmmakers and journalists. If you can talk a little bit about how you worked with the local crew or filmmakers or journalists. I think that's important in terms of how we talk about documenting democracy, especially if we're outsiders and not from that country. How we can work or empower the local journalists and filmmakers to do it as well.
Absolutely. A film like Democrats or like President is a huge production, and I do sound and direct the movie, and I have a cameraman also from Denmark who helps me. But the rest of the people involved in making this film are Zimbabweans who are helping us out on the ground. It's a huge network of people that we met during the making of the first film that's made President possible, and I'm talking about not just people who drive us around and people who sort of help us with the practicalities of filming in a foreign country, but there's a whole sort of network of people who help us to know where to be at the right time. I mean, the government of Zimbabwe is not sending me a message to say that they have a press conference. So my work is relying on a whole system of local activists and journalists and people who know that it's difficult to operate for someone like me, but who also know that we are maybe the chance for them to get the story out because it's so dangerous for themselves. So if you look at the credits of our film, there are about 20 credits that are anonymous, and all those are brave Zimbabweans who have been instrumental in the making of this film. For their safety reason, I can't say so much more about exactly who they are and what they do, but only acknowledge that, of course, it's a huge collaborative project. And we hope that one day when Zimbabwe is a free democratic state and there's nothing to fear, that we can reprint the credits of our film and give everybody who's been involved in the making of the film their proper credits. I've been promised by my producer that we will do that as soon as we can, but for now it's just not safe.
Absolutely. Are you planning on continuing your documentation, your films about Zimbabwe and its process?
To be honest, I didn't even think I was going to make this film. I thought when I'd made the first film, Democrats, I was working on some theater in Berlin, and I had another project lined up that I had worked on to prepare for a year and a half. This film came about because the first film was banned, and I went to Zimbabwe and we unbanned the film through a lengthy court process. And it was during a celebration dinner in Harare that the protagonist of my first film said, "Why don't you come back for the next election? And this time for sure we'll get a happy end to the story." And that's the reason why I made it. Another film in Zimbabwe. I think, unfortunately, that my situation will be difficult after the release of this film in Zimbabwe. I don't think I'll be welcome for a while. But I hope also with these two films that we've made, that we've created a record for Zimbabweans to think about this decade of politics in their lives. And in a democratic Zimbabwe with a democratically elected president, I would hope that a local filmmaker could take the stick and carry on the project, and would be safe to do so, would have freedom of expression both before and after.
Wonderful, Camilla. We are getting down to our last 10 seconds. I can go on and on about this film and about your work, but thank you so much. And thank you to CPH for having us, and everyone go watch this film.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yoruba, Richen, and Camilla Nielsson, for this excellent conversation, this important conversation. We hope for a happy end in real life, Camilla, and for you to be free to make your next films also.